Dugdammi, the man who shook Assyria. In 660 BCE, mighty Assyria was about to be shaken. A Scythian named Dugdammi united many nomadic tribes into a confederation. This nomadic confederation pushed at the borders of Assyria, which so frightened King Ashurbanipal that they felt Assyria had finally met its equal. But who is Dugdammi exactly? The origin of Dugdammi, or Ligodamus, is rather vague according to most historians, but we'll try to discover the facts. His name in classical Greek was Ligodamus. In Assyrian it was either Dugdammi or Tugdammi. He was either a Cimmerian or Scythian / Scythian as some people pronounce it, since the names are interchangeable and are practically the same. His story begins around 660 BCE. It seems that the first known attacks from Dugdammi were against Greek coastal cities such as Sardis and Lydia. Afterward, he pushed at the Assyrian Empire around 652 BCE. Because of this external pressure, Assyria was drawn into another war against Ararat and Dugdammi's forces. The kingdom of Ararat was north of us. They bordered northern Assyria in what is today, I guess you could say, Armenia and eastern Turkey, parts of eastern Turkey. Ashurbanipal mentioned Dugdammi in his annals as king of the Saggs or Kutu. The term Saggi, Scythian, was used primarily by Western Iranians to indicate those who spoke in an Iranian vernacular. The term Kutu or Gutai or even Gutium is loosely used generic and archaic expression during this period of Assyrian history that has no real value for identifying a particular people. The term Gutium or Gutu or Gutai, when used by Ashurbanipal in his annals, refers to those who were hostile to Assyria, particularly those who lived along the Zagros Mountains. However, the term also applied to Manneans and Medes. Manneans were another group of people that lived north of Assyria. They bordered northern Assyria along with Ararat. The Medes are not, it's kind of debatable whether the Medes were actually a kingdom or just a group. It's the name of a region where a bunch of different various ethnic groups lived amongst each other in some type of confederation, but they're primarily what you'd be in western Iran. In other words, the term Gutium indicates anyone who is hostile and lives from the east of the Tigris River into the lands of western Iran. Therefore, it seems evident that when Ashurbanipal speaks of Dugdammi, he is telling us that Dugdammi is from the region of Gutium, which could mean that he came from Media or maybe from the province of Mania. What is certain is that Dugdammi was king of the Saggi, while his base of operations was evidently in the lands of the Gutium. Dugdammi's impact on the Assyrian world was so shocking that the Assyrians found him worthy to hold a certain title. They called him, I'm going to try to pronounce this, Sar Kisatai, or Kisate. I'm not sure how you really pronounce it, but Sar almost sounds like Czar, which means king of the universe or king of the world, which is translated as king of Kish. This does not mean Dugdammi used the title or even considered the title, let alone ever knew about the title, but rather the Assyrians found him worthy of the title. The meaning of the title suggests that Dugdammi controlled regions rather than smaller provinces. In ancient times, this title went to those who controlled vast regions within or outside the borders of Mesopotamia. There's a certain Assyrian court astrologer of Ashurbanipal's, and I'm not sure really how you pronounce this guy's name, Akulanu, I believe that's how it's pronounced. He goes on to tell Ashurbanipal that he would gain back the power and title once Dugdammi was defeated. It seems that Ashurbanipal defeated Dugdammi, he would gain back the respect of his people as well as his enemy. and in doing so, he would control the four corners of the known world. Dugdammi again invaded and raided the borders of Assyria to the north. Ashurbanipal sent forces to check the aggressor, but the outcome of the battle remains uncertain. The possible defeat could have come from another force, but this is unknown. It may have been that Dugdammi's attacker could not beat him, and so they had to settle for a draw. Had Ashurbanipal really defeated Dugdammi, the title Sar-Kessatai would be his. However, Ashurbanipal did not trounce Dugdammi, and the Assyrian soothsayers never mentioned the title, while the Assyrian spies report only hostility. Other inscriptions are somewhat similar. However, they describe Dugdammi. Uh, they describe him more as a demon Golu. According to the Assyrian inscription, Dugdammi died in battle using the imagery of a pierced heart, or his penis was claw and was tomb. Overall, the message is simple. Dugdammi is dead and he no longer poses a threat to Assyria. But there's more. Ashurbanipal mentions that I have changed Dugdammi, the king of the Umamande, destructive barbarian. Dugdammi is clearly dead according to the inscriptions, but another interesting aspect is the insults used to describe Dugdammi by Ashurbanipal. Ashurbanipal also uses the term demon Golu and Tiamat, which describe Dugdammi's character. The term demon Golu is in reference to the 7 demons who love to eat flesh. The next term is Tiamat. Tiamat represents the goddess of chaos. According to Babylonian mythology, Marduk slews Tiamat to create order and peace. Ashurbanipal obviously saw him as being in the same position as Marduk, and that something had to be done to bring about social order. In other words, this war with Dugdammi was a clash of civilizations in Ashurbanipal's mind. You have the civilized Assyrians keeping the peace and stability throughout the known world, while on the other hand, you have the uncivilized Dugdammi and his nomadic forces that represent palpable darkness. The Assyrian inscriptions do not mention where Dugdammi died or how he died, but the statement is rather clear. Dugdammi is dead, for, quote, a sharp pain has pierced his heart, end quote. According to the historian Strabo, Dugdammi died at the Cilicia gates, but refers to him as Lygidamus, and says Lygidamus, however, quote, Lygidamus, however, at the head of his own soldiers, marched as far as Lydia and Ionia and captured Sardis, but lost his life in Cilicia, end quote. Unlike Strabo's account, Ashurbanipal's letters do not mention where the battle took place, but only mention Dugdammi's death. The inscriptions remain silent concerning a battle or a series of battles that most likely took place. However, the inscriptions do suggest a possible ceasefire at one time before the renewal of hostilities between the two. There are 2 accounts of his death. Ashurbanipal's inscriptions mention 2 types of death, one physical and the other one spiritual. For the physical, Ashurbanipal says, quote, I have glorified the powerful Marduk, end quote. Ashurbanipal claims the kill for himself, while in another inscription provided earlier, he speaks of the supernatural being responsible for slaying Dugdammi and says, quote, the weapon of Ashur my lord struck him, end quote. Regardless of the inscriptions, Ashurbanipal was responsible for Dugdammi's death. However, it is interesting that Ashurbanipal speaks of himself as the taker of life, while in another he speaks of a god taking Dugdammi's life. It seems both are true, but with a twist. To summarize, it is safe to say that Dugdammi was no friend of Assyria, and he held in his grasp a huge nomadic empire that threatened the civilization of Assyria. Before the hostilities began, a soft alliance seemingly existed between them. Perhaps because Ashurbanipal had bought off Dugdammi in preparation for dismembering the kingdom of Lydia. If true, it would have been a great move by Ashurbanipal at the time, but the Cimmerians still proved too wild to control directly or indirectly, and they quickly turned their attentions back towards Assyria. This turning could have been due to the desperate plea for help of Ardys, son of Gyges, to Ashurbanipal and his willingness to patch up their differences over past issues. Ashurbanipal may have accepted the terms, which is the cause for concern. At this point, we could say that Dugdammi was still on comfortable terms with Assyria, but felt threatened and undermined by a possible new alliance between Ashurbanipal and Ardis. The reason Ashurbanipal might have rekindled his trust in Lydia rather than that with the Cimmerians could relate to economics and trade. Lydia had an abundance of natural resources at its disposal, such as gold and silver. Trade routes also crossed through Lydia, making it and a commercial. It made it a commercial powerhouse for business and trade. I'll put it that way. The fact is that Assyria needed resources such as iron ore. However, the Cimmerians that lived and roamed the Anatolian region were also in control of the iron ore. The Cimmerians were bad for business, I guess you could say, and they had to go. It seems that by making a pact with Lydia, there was a chance to squeeze and expel the Cimmerians, as well as to establish trade relations with Lydia. Earlier, we discussed the death of Dugdammi and touched on the inconsistency of the battles, which suggests that Ashurbanipal and Dugdammi could have claimed victory. Both sides suffered heavy losses. However, it does seem that Ashurbanipal suffered most of the casualties in this conflict. Before the events that culminated in the death of Dugdammi, it appears that he took a short break before violating the border agreement. This in turn would have caused upheaval along the borders of the Assyrian territory. In the inscriptions, one could glean from them that Ashurbanipal was quietly saying he was defeated. By evoking the god's name as the sole benefactor in defeating Dugdammi, it does suggest that an outside element was possibly responsible. This outside element may have been Medius, according to Strabo. Dugdammi, king of the Cimmerians, or Saggs, however, at the head of his own soldiers, marched as far as Lydia and Ionia and captured Sardis, but lost his life in Cilicia. Oftentimes, both Cimmerians and Trirans made such invasions as these, but they say that the Trirans and Cobus were finally driven out by Medius, the king of the Scythians. Let these illustrations be given here, insomuch as they involve matters of fact which have a bearing upon the entire compass of the world in general. As Strabo suggests, it is quite possible that Medius did defeat and kill Dugdammi in Cilicia around 640 BCE, if not 639 BCE. Ashurbanipal might have sent envoys to invite Medius to invade the lands of Dugdammi and kill him. The reason could have been due to the wars in which Ashurbanipal was already engaged. Ashurbanipal was still intermittently fighting the Scythians and Cimmerians, and at the same time had to suppress the rebellions in Elam and Babylonia. Because of this, not only was he depleting his forces, he also overextended his lines of supply and support. The massive onslaught on Assyria meant Ashurbanipal had to find someone to aid him, or hope for something or someone to intervene. He needed something as mighty as Dugdammi's armies in the north, whether it was by force or influence. Medius was the choice. Strabo also mentions that Medius drove the Cimmerians out of Anatolia. This could be true, but unlikely. Medius may have defeated the forces led by Dugdammi, but more likely the dwindling remainder of Dugdammi's forces simply joined Medius. This region was under Cimmerian control and probably did not mind being ruled by one of their own kin. Dugdammi did have a son by the name of Sandaksatru, who succeeded Dugdammi after his death. However, nothing's really known about him or where he went. However, it is possible that his son was with his father at the Cilicia during the battle and fled into Europe along with the remainder of his forces when his father was defeated and killed. Nevertheless, the inscriptions make no mention of his son's presence at this particular battle. If you're looking for more on Dugdammi, I actually have a whole huge article that provides even more information, titled Dugdammi, the Man Who Shook Assyria, of course. You can find that at www.camry.org. The title of the article is Dugdammi, the Man Who Shook Assyria. It's over 5,000 words, so take your time. And if you like this little mini lecture you just heard, leave me a thumbs up, comment below, no fighting. I will leave references at the bottom of the video for you to follow if you wish to pursue even further. And I thank you for your time, and until next time. See you around.